I want to now look at some problems out of section 5.1, and we've been talking about inverse functions. So let's do, I think I'm going to do 3 problems where we're going to find the inverse function. So if we have a function f of x, the inverse function is denoted with a -1 exponent up in the corner. So, in class, I gave you the steps to go through to find an inverse function. So now let's just do some examples. My first example, if we're given the function f of x equals 3x plus 5, we're going to try and find the inverse function. So the steps are fairly straightforward. First thing you do is you replace the f of x with y. We learned that f of x and y are interchangeable. So we want to now turn this into an equation with x and y. And the second step is you swap the x and the y's. So instead of y equals 3x plus 5, I'm going to write it as x equals 3y plus 5. And now I'm going to solve this equation for y, which means get y on one side by itself. So I'll subtract 5 from both sides. And now to solve for y, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And if I rewrite it, if I just swap the signs, I have y equals x minus 5 sorry about that. Y equals x minus 5 over 3. And then the last step is to simply rename the y now as my inverse. So I can say the inverse function is x minus 5 over 3. And just for fun, one way to check an inverse is I can take my original function and plug in a number for x. Say, for instance, I'll just set x equal to 1, and my original function would be 3 times 1 plus 5, which would be 8. And now, if I take 8, and I plug that into my inverse function, I should end up with what I started with, which was x equal 1. So now, if I say inverse function of x equal to 8, 8 minus 5 over 3, which is 3 over 3, which is 1, and lo and behold, I get what I started with. Let's do a couple more problems quickly. How about 3x plus 2 over 2x minus 5. So here's my function, and I want to find the inverse of that function. First thing I'll do, instead of f of x, I'll write it as y equals 3x plus 2 over 2x minus 5. And then I want to swap the x's and the y's, so now I have x equals 3y plus 2 over 2y minus 5. And now I want to take this equation and solve it for y, which means getting y by itself. So let me rewrite it down here, because the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 2y minus 5 to get rid of my fraction. So when I do that, I end up with x times 2y minus 5. I simply put the x out front, equals 3y plus 2. I need to go ahead and multiply out the parentheses. So I have 2xy minus 5x equals 3y plus 2. Since I'm solving for y, let's get everything with the y on one side. So let's just go ahead. How about I'll subtract 3y from both sides. And I get 2xy minus 3y equals 2. Oh, I forgot the minus 5x. Sorry about that. And now I want to add 5x to both sides, because I only want my y's on the left-hand side. So if I take it up here, now I end up with 2xy minus 3y equals 2 plus 5x. And now on the left-hand side, if I want to solve for y, I'm going to factor out a y. So I have y times, in parentheses, 2x minus 3 equals 2 plus 5x. And if I get y by itself, I'll divide both sides by 2x minus 3. So I end up with 2 plus 5x over 2x minus 3. And now I can simply replace the y with my inverse function notation, f inverse of x. All right. Sorry for the sort of ran out of room here, but hopefully you can follow what I was doing. Let's just do one more example. An example of if you're given a function, how to find the inverse. So our third example would be f of x equals 2x cubed minus 5. We want to find the inverse function. Let's first replace f of x with y. Y equals 2x cubed minus 5. Now we're going to swap the x's and the y's. So x equals 2y cubed minus 5. And now I'm going to solve for y. I want to get y by itself. So I'll add 5 to both sides. So I have x plus 5 equals 2y cubed. I want to get rid of the 2 in front of the y cubed, so I divide both sides by 2. And let me now rewrite this as, put the y cubed first, x plus 5 over 2. Now what do I do if I have a y cubed and I want to get to y? Well, you take the cube root, right? Of course, you have to take the cube root of both sides. So you end up with y equals the cube root of x plus 5 over 2. And then this becomes your inverse function. All right, so hopefully you will not find it too hard to find the inverse function of various functions.